Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of my 3-part course on the basics and essentials of mindfulness practice. In this video, I'll be expanding on instincts and their emotional drive states in order to help you make informed decisions when working with emotions during your mindfulness practices. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, click here to watch that first. I'll also leave a link in the descriptions below. Quick recap. Last video, you learned that mindfulness is our moment-to-moment metacognitive awareness, made possible by our conscious and purpose-oriented decentering. And that mindfulness exercises are tools to train our competence at consciously decentering in order to better flow between states. I explained why, like many skills, mindfulness is value neutral, its moral value being dependent upon the purpose it is directed towards. That it can either be used in service of optimal adaptation and lifespan development through action in the world, or you can use it to suppress adaptive instinctual signals and to delude yourself in what it means to be a thriving human being. The catastrophic history of the Zen soldier proves that with enough practice, you can dissociate to such a degree that you can eliminate your self-concept, consisting of your ownership of your conscience, your principles, your thinking, and your judgment. No attachments, not to your own life, nor your family's, and certainly not to your enemies. Take it to its practical consequence, and you have allowed yourself to become fully primed to be the sacrificial vehicle of someone else's purpose. Let's get into it. Now that I have your attention, I think it would be good for us to start with a similar mindful breathing exercise to the one we did last time to help you settle in and to hone your focus. When you're ready to focus on the contents of today, will you feel yourself getting more and more comfortable in your chair as your eyes close all by themselves? Find yourself focusing on your breathing. Now, as you explore the various aspects of your breath, notice the sensations, the movement of your lungs, the rising and falling of your diaphragm, the subtle vibrations, keep focusing on your breath to start to understand that the breath is the breath of life, the clearest act of existing in continuity with our environment. Every breath you take satisfies your instinctual air hunger, and the level of air hunger you feel informs the moment of your next breath. As you continue to pay attention to your breathing and consciously breathe, you may notice your attention being pulled to other things. And that's okay. Just watch it for now, and then bring your attention back to the many features of your breathing. Know in your heart that if the distractions are truly important, they will arise all by themselves after this exercise. If you notice yourself somehow having shifted your attention onto other sensations in your body. The weight of your clothes, sounds from the outside, the temperature of the room. Whenever you find your attention taken away from the experience of your breathing, simply notice where it has gone and bring it back to the breathing. Do this as many times as you need to. We'll do this for around 2 minutes. As soon as you know you're ready to return and continue with this video, will your eyes open? Just like last time, here are some questions to ask yourself about what you just experienced. Was it easier or harder than last time? What did the exercise do for you? What was different? What did you notice about yourself as you consciously decentered away from arising mental contents repeatedly? And what does that say about the nature of some of these contents? Pause the video here and take some time to try to answer some of these questions. You may have noticed that I placed more emphasis on the body in that meditation just now. That's because this video's focus is going to be on you, your mind-body, your totality. By the end of this video, you should come to a decent understanding about the role of feelings and the basics of the 7 Pankseppian instinctual emotions and each of their functions. The reason this is important is that it will help deepen your understanding of the guts of human nature and come to know the purposes of their associated emotional signals better, so that when they come up in you in relations to your concerns, you can better appreciate what they are and also what they're motivating you to do. My method is superior to the common alternatives, which are methods calling on you to ignore and devalue your feelings in favor of some undefinable higher plane of mystical woo-woo experience, whatever that is. My approach takes feelings seriously as sources of information for a reason to then utilize and investigate in service of reality orientation. By understanding our emotional responses to objects and situations, we are much more prepared in our ability, with the use of conscious and purpose-oriented decentering, to investigate and discover the ideas that inform these emotions in these specific contexts. While I will not be telling you here exactly which ideas and which purposes you should live by, besides saying that your survival and thriving depends on said ideas' alignment with reality, your gaining of a decent understanding of your own emotions will provide a powerful and solid ground for you to launch your mindful investigations into your own ideas and purposes. What you do with that discovery will ultimately be up to you and dependent upon the type of integrated person that you want to be. But first, let's quickly review your homework. If you did your homework, you would have come up with 2 ways you can use conscious decentering adaptively to help you with a current concern, and 2 ways you can use conscious decentering maladaptively to make the same concern worse. For each answer that you came up with, ask yourself, what do you think that sort of thing would do to you in the long term? How might it affect your relationships with others and with yourself? What do you think might happen to the suppressed contents? And specifically to the negatives, what do you think makes these negative ways so attractive? Importantly, how might this affect your ability to take the necessary adaptive actions? And before that, how would you even know whether what you're doing is adaptive or maladaptive? When it comes to determining which feelings and their associated thoughts are adaptive and which aren't, so you don't stupidly decenter from the wrong things for the wrong reasons, it is essential that you have a baseline understanding of where they come from, as in which instinct is producing the drive state. Then depending on how you're living and the way your complexes encourage, divert, and block said drive, produces the feelings in order to trigger consciousness with its reality orientation and perception to act towards its satisfaction. As feelings by definition are felt, and there are many different types of feelings. There are bodily ones like hunger, thirst, thermal sensation, and then there are the more interesting emotional ones like joy, fear, and grief. So I'll just let you know now that there are some scientific disagreements on how to best categorize these feelings, but nobody doubts the fact that they exist. You might ask, what's the point of feelings? Well, that's a good question, and the answer is twofold. First, the deepest biological function of feelings is that they guide our behavior in conditions of uncertainty. It enables us to determine in the heat of the moment whether one course of action is better or worse than another. You can see from this that feelings possess inherent value judgments. They are not value neutral. And secondly, feelings enables learning from experience. Think about that. Feelings exist because they serve important functions that are crucial to our ability to adapt, survive, and reproduce. Without it, we can't learn. In fact, without the ability to feel, we would technically be in a coma. Our ability to feel and the deep brain structures that make it possible are responsible for consciousness itself. Many people like to identify with their knowledge or their more cognitive capabilities. That's their cortical functions. You hear people often saying things like, your thoughts cause your emotions. But what a lot of people don't know is that there are children born in this world entirely without a cortex. They're called hydroencephalic children. They are very much conscious and in no way living in a vegetative or unresponsive state. Sure, they may lack the higher functions, but they are awake, often alert, they smile, they laugh, they fuss and cry, they play, and they even come to expect regular presence of things in the course of daily routines. That's right. It means implicit subcortical learning. These kids function almost entirely on instincts. Now, you might say, earlier you seem to suggest that our ideas, conceptions, and cognitions inform our instincts and their emotional drive states. And now you're saying that instincts and their emotional drive states can work without ideas, conceptions, and cognitions. Yes, while it may seem confusing, both statements are true. There is no contradiction. Our ideas inform our instincts on how to best satisfy its needs. Without ideas, instincts still exist and function. They just do so largely uninformed, reverting to relying on our ancient biological anticipations for contextual content and their respective innate action patterns. Given that life is complicated, uninformed instincts will almost certainly lead to an early death without heavy social support. This is also why you frequently see people with unearned monetary wealth possessed by bad ideas. Money can delay the inevitable consequences of being misaligned with reality. But eventually, the chickens come home to roost. So, instincts. I want to share with you today the late Dr. Jacques Panksepp's taxonomy of our basic emotional systems. Taxonomy is a classification framework. It is an ordered arrangement of groups and categories. By the way, maybe some of you have heard of Dr. Paul Ekman with his famous study of basic emotions based on common facial expressions. Well, this is similar, but with heavier emphasis on neuroscience. Through study of the brain, Panksepp identified 7 basic emotional systems that we share with all mammals. So these structures are at least 200 million years old, as it was around then that mammals split from birds. And what he did was, he mapped their neuroanatomical correlates in the form of entire brain systems and motivational pathways. I'm not going to go into the anatomic systems here in these videos because that's out of the scope of this video. But if you want to learn about them, I highly recommend you check out the supplementary material afterwards, which you can find in the video description below. Instead, I'm going to touch on the emotional systems and their functions. Panksepp identified 7. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't more out there. Just think of some of our complex developmental instincts. It simply means that there is overwhelming scientific consensus that these 7 certainly exist. First up, lust. By the way, Panksepp capitalized all 7 of these terms to distinguish them from colloquial usage, but that's only relevant if you're writing this down, which you probably should. Lust. This is somewhat analogous to the Freudian concept of libido. You feel it when sex is prioritized over other motivations. When that happens, the feeling of sexual pleasure and the pursuit of it takes over, and you become driven by it. You enter into a specific psychophysiological drive state. You start paying attention to things differently than you usually do, and you behave differently too. Furthermore, it feels good. Why? Because people that feel good pursuing sex and having sex are more motivated to do it, and are motivated to do more of it, which then tend to mean that they reproduce better than those that don't. It's basic natural selection. So the function of lust is to motivate the pursuit and the act of sexual intercourse. A question to think about here would be, how sexually frustrated do you need to be before it can overpower your nervousness and motivate actual pursuit of a romantic partnership? The answer is not 0, and that is why we have lust. Next up, seeking. Consider this the big daddy of our primary process emotional systems. It produces feelings of curiosity, expectancy, enthusiasm, and optimism, which motivates exploratory foraging behavior, which is a proactive engagement with uncertainty. Professor Mark Solms called it the default emotional state because that's where our energy tends to go when we're not in the grips of any other task-related feelings. Our seeking instinct is why we look for interesting things to do, to see, to feel, to learn, to eat, whatever. It is the instinct that is most affected by our ideas about our own capability in the face of vast nature. This is also the system that gets severely downregulated during the state of depression and overly upregulated during the state of mania. Dopamine modulates this system. Next up, rage. because things don't always go well when we're out in the world. Panksepp avoided the term aggression here for good reason, but if you want to look at aggression, rage would be classified as hot aggression as opposed to cold aggression. A classic example of cold aggression is a lion stalking and tearing its prey to pieces. There's no hate, it's predatory. In fact, that's engaging the seeking instinct more than anything else. So, rage, hot aggression, and its emotion of anger and its attached physiological state is designed for the function of removing perceived or anticipated obstacles between us and what we need or want. Without rage, we wouldn't be inclined to fight for what we desire. There would be no incentive to seek justice or to protect those that matter to us. And sooner or later, we'd be dead, or our family would be dead. And that's the end of that. Next up, fear. Because sometimes fighting is either not possible or it's not going to end well for you. Humans have many anticipations to fear certain things like heights, dark places, and snakes. But they also have other learned fears because the prior don't account for the total possibility of dangerous things that exist in the world. That's where cortical and subcortical learning comes in. The function of the emotional feeling of fear is to alert you of perceived or anticipated dangers and tells you moment by moment whether you are heading towards or away from safety. I'm sure you can probably guess why that might be overall beneficial to our survival. Benzodiazepines modulate this system. Next is panic/grief, also known as separation anxiety. We mammals need to be cared for, especially humans, and especially human infants. Unlike fear conditioning, which can only take a single instance of exposure, human attachments take about 6 months to form. When mammals, including us, are separated from their attachment figures, they act out a prototypical sequence of states and behaviors. They first go through the protest phase, followed by the despair phase. Why? Well, if you're a vulnerable pup and you lose your mother in the wild, the feeling of panic motivates you to express distress vocalizations and searching behavior. That is the protest phase. If that doesn't work, you then move onto the despair phase, where seeking is inhibited and the feeling of hopelessness kicks in, and you quite literally give up and stay put. What could possibly be the function of that terrible state? Because letting the whole force know that you're alone and vulnerable is quite the poor survival strategy. Staying still also increases the likelihood for your caregiver to find you through backtracking. After a period of protest, the costs start to outweigh the benefits. And so over the course of natural selection, it has become the inherited survival strategy. The function of grief, therefore, is to inhibit seeking and suppress all desires and actions to hopefully evade detection by predators and maximize rediscovery by lost attachment figure. Now, notice how Panksepp intentionally doesn't use the label anxiety. That's because both fear and panic/grief are very different forms of anxiety and are two separate instinctual systems. Opiates, like the ones found in heroin, fentanyl, and morphine, modulates this system. The reason these drugs are so addictive and difficult to get off of is because they affect the attachment system itself. It is literally the addiction system. If you think about what people feel when they're on these drugs, comfort, security, and that blessed feeling of being cared for, it should quickly make sense why they take it and for what lack they're using the drug to compensate for. Next is care, the other side of attachment, since we not only need to be cared for, but also typically become caregivers ourselves. The feelings of care and its associated chemical changes work to bond us to those we are looking after. These same chemicals, estrogen, prolactin, progesterone, and oxytocin, are found at higher levels on the average in females, and they rise dramatically during pregnancy and childbirth for obvious reasons. A child is a demanding creature, and care, well, pushes you to actually care instead of throwing the screaming thing out the window. Last but certainly not least is play. We positively need to play. Parents, listen. All juvenile mammals engage in rough and tumble play, and if they don't get to play one day, they'll try to make it up for the next day. Functionally speaking, the drive to play motivates seeking to find play partners, and play itself is not only highly enjoyable, but also, and perhaps more importantly, functions to teach us about the social boundaries and the limits of what is socially tolerable and permissible. It teaches reciprocity and requires you to take account of the feelings of others. It develops empathy. How? Because if you overstep boundaries in your play, others won't want to play with you, and usually that's enough incentive to self-correct. Deprived of play during your crucial developmental years, and you stunt your social development, often leading to long, painful years of social isolation and falling in with the wrong crowds. Those that also have poorly defined social boundaries, then it becomes a case of the blind leading the blind. For humans, play can take many forms due to our capacity for imagination. We can play not only with other people, but also with ourselves in fantasies of imitation that teaches us what it's like to be someone who's characteristic of this or that role. Our instinct to play lie at the foundation of social rules, social hierarchies, and even to psychotherapy itself. And there you have it, the role of feelings and the 7 Pankseppian instinctual emotional systems and their functions. Pause the video here and write them down if you can. Hopefully, you'll now have a basic but decent understanding of the role of feelings and the importance of instincts and their intended functions. Now, whenever you're looking to address a concern, ask yourself, what sort of feelings is it accompanied by? Which of the instinctual emotional systems are responsible for what you're feeling? Then, given your understanding of your identified instinctual emotional systems, what are the ideas that are providing the contents of your concern their emotional salience? To clarify that last question, let's take an example of a man who is feeling excessive panic at his upcoming job interview. If he knows that the function of panic is to motivate distress vocalizations and searching behavior to recover lost attachment figure, the fact that he's feeling panic means that he's feeling the separation anxiety of being apart, metaphorically or literally, from a valued attachment figure. The question is then, what is that attachment figure? Is it a person or an idea or both? Maybe it's the inherited idea from his pathological father that, quote, he won't be able to handle any real responsibility, let alone a job. That the real world will be too much for him. If so, the man has now identified a crippling negative father complex. His attachment figure is the security of the easy and safe as framed and defined by the ideas that run his father complex, as mentioned above. One solution is productive achievement, an effortful achievement that he can, without question, be proud of. This is the path of self-confirmation, one that naturally invites the confirmation of others. See how, by understanding the function of panic here, we can dramatically narrow the scope of our investigation, where instead of starting from a vague sense of anxiety with an unspecified message of discomfort and insecurity, you can ask, what is the attachment figure or love object that I believe I have lost? Know that where there are emotions, there is information. By learning the function of your primary emotional drive states, you can use mindfulness to identify the emotions, increase resolution of focus, review underlying ideas, untangle seeming contradictions, and enact precise and targeted solutions that are aligned with reality. For homework, I highly recommend that you look further into our 7 primary emotional systems to understand the inseparability of mind and body is to exist in reality, which will serve as the solid ground you need to tackle real problems. Understand this properly, and you will be protected from the anti-human doctrines, as well as from the negative usages of mindfulness practice. For that, along with the other supplementary materials, there will be a lecture presentation by Professor Mark Solms in the video description below, where he explains our primary emotional systems in greater depth. I do recommend that you try to check out at least some of the materials below before moving on to part 3, where I'll be going over the role of consciousness and how you can create your own mindfulness practice. And that's a wrap. If you know someone who can benefit from this, please share the video with them. Let me know your thoughts by dropping a comment below. And finally, like and subscribe for more future content on mental health and human nature. My name's Michael Chan, and I'll see you in part 3.